4E. I think this is important for us to discuss. What are the 4Es?
So I think we should have 6Es, but I'll tell you what the standard 4Es are.
And then the bonus 2. I'm into it.
So this is the idea that cognition is inherently embodied, first E, embedded, coupled to the environment, second E, right? Enacted, right? Cognition is something that you are doing. It's not something you have, right? It's between you and the world, not within you, right? And then extended. Most of our cognition is not done inside of us. It's done through the world. And this includes other people. So, for example, you and I are having a conversation right now. We're solving a problem, and this is depending on people building computers, setting up the internet, setting up Zoom or Riverside. Neither one of us invented the English language, etc. And so, and all of these things, and even literacy, like literacy is not natural, but we internalize it, but it allows us to link our cognition in profound ways. And so most of our problem solving is done in an extended way. I guess the classic book by this is Cognition in the Wild by Ed Hutchins, where he talks about the fact that no person navigates a ship. There's a whole bunch of different people doing different roles and a whole bunch of equipment, and they form a dynamical system that is actually responsible for navigating the ship. Myself and one of my dear friends and great co-authors, Dan Chiappi, we've published 3 papers on NASA scientists moving the rovers around on Mars, right? Mm-hmm. And how do they form this distributed cognition, especially with that huge time gap, right? The time delay. And how do they make it work? And how does that distributed cognition work? And because they get very powerful sense of an emergent kind of we agency that's above and beyond just adding the parts. So that's the extended. So embodied. Embodied means you don't have a body. You are a body. And your mind and your body are not separate things. They're different aspects of what you are. And people may say, what do you mean by that? What do I mean by that? Well, remember I said earlier, like, you have this problem you're facing, which is, what do I pay attention to? Right? What do I focus my attention to? What do I ignore? And this is not cold calculation. It's also your affect. It means, what do you care about and what do you not care about? Reed Montague, the neuroscientist, put it really well. He said, the difference between us and computers is we care about information and they don't. Right? And that's our great strength and our great weakness. Now, the thing is, why do you care about information? You care about information because, and this is the work of Evan Thompson, a colleague of mine, well, he was at U of T, we're still a friend, right? It is you are a self-making thing. That's what a living thing is. You care about information because you are moment by moment taking care of yourself. Not that yourself is over here and you're taking care of it. You are a self-organizing, self-taking care of thing. And because of that, you have to care about this information rather than that information. And organisms with other bodies presumably have different salience landscapes. Wittgenstein famously well said, even if a lion could speak, we would not understand them. Because even if they were using English correctly, what they found relevant and salient would be bizarre to us because they have different bodies that are embedded in different environments. And that is not happenstance. That is constitutive of you being a cognitive agent. If you were not embodied, you do not have any reason for caring about this information rather than that information. And then you have faced the fact that the world is combinatorially explosive in the amount of information available to you.
Yeah. This is very ineptly what I was trying to convey very early in the conversation. Predominantly, and I encourage people to find this, it's not going to be immediately coming to the tip of my tongue, but Steve Jurvetson, who's very technical investor, I think he did electrical engineering and mechanical engineering degree in 3 years at Stanford or something like that. I'm probably getting some of the specifics wrong, but he's been on the podcast before, and he had this very long Facebook post discussing why it would be difficult, if not impossible, to experience anything as a human if we were just brains in a jar.
Yes, brain in a vat problem, yes. Yep.
Yeah, brain in a vat problem. And I found it very compelling and sort of embarrassing that it wasn't self-evident to me right off the bat. It's like without these appendages and this this multifaceted organism to interface with an environment, it's what we experience as consciousness just doesn't seem, at least offhand to me, possible, which makes it very precious that we have this experience.
Yeah. Being embodied is really wonderful, actually.
Yeah. So what are the two E's that lead to six?
Emotional. The idea that our knowing and our emoting are separable things, I think, is one of the great mistakes that came out of the Enlightenment Romanticism conflict. Being rational, ratio, proper proportioning, it's about putting things into perspective, perspectival knowing, and caring about them in the right way, and knowing within that when and where and how to be logical, et cetera, et cetera. We've already talked about that. And I mean, a good place to point people about this is Damasio's Descartes' error, right? You have people who have a certain kind of brain damage, and they have the frontal cortex is working such that you could give them a standard IQ test and they could do all the computations quite well in it. But you could drive them insane by saying, before you take the test, I want you to choose, should you write it in red ink or black ink or blue ink? And then they go crazy because they have no motivation, they have no affect, they have no reason to care about this rather than that. And so they, right? Emotion and cognition are interweaving and interaffording. Emotions are not irrational. Like I said, there is no one faculty that is infallibly good, right? Yes, your emotions can lead you astray, but like try living without them and see how rational you can be, right? Your agency will be crippled. And I mean that seriously. That would be my 50. The 6 has to do with it's a somewhat technical term, exaptation, which is drawn from evolutionary theory. Let me give you a clear example. So I'm using my tongue to speak, right? But tongues did not evolve for speech. If they did, all the animals with tongues would be talking to us, right? What you have is you have a very flexible muscle, right? Because it's for mastication. And it has a lot of very fine nerve endings because it's for poison and sucrose detection and things like that. And it happens to be in the air passageway. So you've got something that's like pre-adapted, already almost perfectly built for being a speaking machine. And so exaptation is you take something and you repurpose it. And this is the work of Michael Anderson. Like the way the cerebellum has been repurposed from being like a sensory motor balance thing to being how we balance and move around in abstract space. Right? And so that exaptation, the idea of Michael Anderson, more recent work, especially, and DeHaan and others, is the brain is constantly doing that. The brain is constantly exapting things like machines that have been built for doing one thing, and then they get repurposed, or they also use the language of circuit reuse, like from computer science, right? That has been repurposed.
Huh. I like the 6 E's.